It is my great pleasure to introduce Chloe Rankin to you. Chloe is an extraordinary student here at Positas. She's a very dedicated student, works very hard, and her work reflects the amount of work that she puts in. Chloe, I'm going to let her talk a little bit about herself, but I want to let you know that she... Huh?
I didn't say I'm an amazing person.
She's an amazing person. Okay, good example of what we're going to talk about, because we talked about amazing. I say extraordinary. But for you, those two words don't necessarily mean the same thing, because one of the issues with autism is that words are very specific and very concrete. So we just had a little gap in communication because I used a different word other than what we agreed to. So Chloe will talk more about that later on. Chloe is very interested in pursuing a career researching autism.
Neurology.
Because autism is a neurological disorder. And she really is dedicated to informing and educating individuals about autism and how it affects them in their lives. So we are happy to christen her journey on the road of lecturer extraordinaire with you, and I think you will enjoy her presentation. She just asked that she wait until the end of the presentation so she can get through it, and she'll open it up for questions at that point. So, Chloe, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Chloe Rankin. For those of you who do know me, I'm very pleased to introduce you to my faculty training presentation about how to understand, support, and deal with students with autism in a college setting. So we're just going to get started with this. Before I do that, I just want to say a little bit about my experience with autism. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 9 years old. When I was in 7th grade, I had diagnostic testing done at the Regional Center in East Bay because my diagnosis was made by a therapist when I was 9, and then I was referred to Regional Center when I was, I think, 11 years old or 10 years old. And my symptoms are repetitive behavioral patterns, echolalia, restricted interests, sensory stimuli, successful visual memory, sensory learning processes, and sociological deficits in human attachment. And to me, autism makes me unique and special and challenges me in real world situations. I'm going to get started with this. With the introduction. So this is the introduction of this training. So these are my objectives, are to raise autism awareness to the faculty and staff and educate them to resolve particular circumstances or challenges that occur with students on the autism spectrum using the information and strategies presented here. The strategies are not limited to students on the autism spectrum, but you can use them among students with other intellectual disabilities and even people who are non-disabled. Okay, so this is part 1, understanding autism. So, do any of you know exactly what autism is? I guess probably some of you do know, but it's a neurological disorder that has a wide spectrum ranging from low to high functioning, and it has a strong genetic basis. Strong genetic basis, and every individual on the spectrum has different degrees of abilities, and the symptoms vary from each individual. And these are the areas it affects, such as development, socialization, communication, and the problematical, stereotypical behavioral patterns and sensory stimuli also play a part in the disorder as well. Okay, these are this is the symptoms of autism. Okay. All of these are the symptoms of autism. Not every individual is going to have these symptoms, but these are the most common symptoms that are classical. They're the classical symptoms that are diagnosed usually in childhood, I would say. And some of these I have, but I'm kind of, out of line with my education. Sorry, I trip up on my thoughts sometimes. Part of my disability. Understanding autism. So this is what we all need to understand about autism, because most people don't understand all the problematical causes that happen with an autistic individual. And some of you may have had experiences with people with autism, and I'm not misbehaving, I have autism. So this is one image I found that I think would be really beneficial to showing you that people who are autistic don't necessarily are trying to behave badly, but some people can perceive their behavior as negative sometimes because they don't have the knowledge to understand the disorder. So this is what is important to understand. It is important to understand autism because not everyone is aware of the deficits that an autism spectrum disorder individual displays that can make others feel vulnerable to them about any kind of behaviors that occur as a result of the disorder. And as a result, you can't always characterize the individual's behaviors as negative because sometimes as an autistic individual, we tend to, react negative, or sometimes we tend to it's part of sensory integration, but sometimes we are bombarded with sensory stimulation that we have trouble relating ourselves to the world, and even being tolerable in situations. So this is why this is really important. We can't always characterize, and it's really important in a college setting. Okay. This is how you can better your communication with autistic students. Well, it's pretty much one term. Be concrete, realistic, and specific when you communicate with them. Now, you have to be concrete because autism individuals, their brains think and process things differently. And when you're specific, you're basically being concrete about what you're trying to communicate to them. So like say, I'm going to give you an example. Like say, you say, don't do this or don't do that. You're being concrete by just saying, period, that's not okay. Or, you have to be realistic too. You can't give the wrong impressions because otherwise the student's going to get mixed messages from you about what you're trying to mean or what they're sensing from you. So this is really important. Being concrete is always really important. How to support students with autism? Well, this plays a part this really plays a part in academics because not every professor is going to understand how to support students with autism because they have learning, deficits that make it hard for them to do academics. So, how to support students better. These are all the factors that you have to take into consideration. So getting to know the student as an individual will help increase your knowledge about them as an individual and really get to know their disability a little bit more so that you know how to work with them. And communication is crucial. You have to have communication when you're working with an autistic individual. Otherwise, they're never going to know what you're trying to get to them, or possibly they're going to push boundaries, even possibly limitations. And you always want to incorporate use of individuals. Now, this is a really important thing because the autistic individual's brain has a very good visual memory because the occipital lobes are very activated in autistic individuals, which is the lobes at the back of the brain. Some of you know that, especially the sight teachers. teachers. And so when you incorporate the use of visuals, you're basically showing, the student how to process the information rather than just, because it's harder for autistic individuals to process information when it's harder. Okay, maintain a high degree of structure. You have to, that one's a little hard to explain, but you have to be able to, structure your success in a more individual basis way, which is, you have to really structure how they're going to succeed in the class and how they're going to meet their goals. And you always want to prepare for any changes in advance because autistic individuals have a hard time going through transitions. And I'm going to go skip through the rest of these. How to deal with students. Okay, so now.
Yeah, he's got too much hair.
Okay, that's funny. Okay, college professors. Now I'm going to basically give you the strategies now of what you should do when your stress becomes too much, that it becomes too much for you to handle. So these are the problematical things affecting your job performance. Affects mindset, affects confidence, and stress becomes strategies. Now here are going to be your strategies for when you become overly overwhelmed with students. How you can take control of the situation. Analyze what you might be doing that's contributing to the problem. Clearly define limitations. Prevention. These are how to prevent this from happening. So don't worry that setting boundaries will be hurtful. So you have to basically have the confidence to say to the student, you have to, Jim, pick up for me.
That your guidelines are very clear and consistent. So sometimes it'll feel like the person isn't processing what you're telling them, or they may become upset by what you're saying. But if you say it in a clear, confident kind of way, it reassures them that this is about setting the boundary. It's not a personal issue.
Yeah. Being consistent. So you have to keep being consistent and being concrete with students. And don't agree to something you're uncomfortable with and then protest about it later. Because then basically you're creating problems for yourself and creating problems for the student. And always do what's right for you. If doing work in your job place is more important than giving personal individual attention to the student, then you really have to prioritize what's more important because your career is most important as much as supporting students is most important. What's right for you is the best, more confident for you internally. Analyze what you might be doing that's contributing to the problem. Okay, basically you have to take these into consideration if problems that keep occurring or if your boundaries keep being pushed. So these are the possible things. Are you saying no to things that you should be prohibiting? And all these other things, what's at risk? Are you being specific enough? Are you giving the wrong impressions of all those things? Okay, this is a really good strategy. It took me a long time to put this strategy together, but I think it's really important to know how to effectively set boundaries with students. Okay, there's your little stop sign to show to the students visually. Okay, so this is called a setting boundaries model. And there are 3 stages of principles that are really important when you set boundaries because they basically make the boundary as a whole and make it more concrete, make it more easier for the student to understand. So stage 1, condition, stage 2, restrict, stage 3, reinforce. So there's 3 stages and meanings of each one. So condition means that you're constructing and putting boundaries in effect. And 2 is restricting means you are limiting or stopping any recurrent behavior, interaction, or communication, and not allowing either
Reinforcing means you're stabilizing your boundaries with confidence, gratitude, and sufficiently communicating with the student. And you must, in a professional hit, you must activate stages 1 and 2 before you can do stage 3. And stage 3 is probably the best stage to do because basically means that your boundaries are getting more stabilized and concrete, and that you're feeling more confident that the student is following through with what you're saying and being able to follow those limitations and in all of your personal personal and professional boundaries. So condition, like you want to condition your role to the student. That's one of the examples. And when you're restricting, basically, you're amounting or maximizing something with the student or extinguishing a certain behavior with the student. What was the other one? Well, I can't think of the other one. But when you extinguish a behavior, it's a very concrete way of saying no to the student. This is not okay. You can't do this anymore. And basically, when you're reinforcing, based off the 3 stages, you are basically, being able to build that confidence in your relationship with the student, because it helps, the student understand you better, and it helps the student learn interaction skills. Do you have any more slides? That's it?
That's it. Chloe also prepared a little packet. We only printed 20 of them, so.
I want to share it to them. So basically, this is your little strategies packet on how to understand, support, and deal with students with autism. And this is more in-depth information on how to do all the information that was on the slide. But here's a page all about autism, and here's, let me see. And here's, it has stuff in here about how to resolve conflicts, how to set boundaries, what things you should avoid around students with autism. And the last page, my experience with autism is all right here, and has all the information about my experience with autism. And here's a reference page, and there's a YouTube video called A Professor's Guide, Understanding the Student with Asperger's Syndrome. And I really encourage you to watch that video. It's a 15-minute video, but they basically explain how you should follow through in classroom settings, things like that. So this is all your references that you can use for self-support. This whole packet is for self-support. And you can also use it, among non-disabled students and other students with intellectual disabilities. And it took me all semester to do it, so I hope it's worked for all of you. And I really thank all of you for coming to my training.
I've got paper copies of these, but I will actually be sending this out via email, so you will have reference materials available to you. Yeah.
Can you send that as well?
Sure, absolutely.
There's other information I'm sending to you.
Okay. So as information rolls in, I'll send it out to you. What do you want?
If anyone has any questions, do you want to ask me? Yeah.
So, is it common that you would identify yourself to an instructor as having autism?
behaviors that are associated with autism. Because for me, it's more likely, every time I get a new teacher, I always tell them I have autism.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And is that common?
It's become more and more common. I think we've had this conversation before, where a diagnosis of autism has just become, very common and almost routine these days.
The diagnostic rate is just rapidly increasing.
Exactly. And I think in general, not just with autism, but we're finding with students with disabilities, they're much more open about their disability because it's sort of like the veil has been taken off of it, and it's no longer seen as something that people should be hiding, but actually something that's just part of who they are, and it's just introducing themselves, this is who I am, this is what I need. So in our program, we obviously really encourage students to advocate for themselves and pose an excellent example.
I think it's really important that people understand our struggle, what we struggle with, because we have a lot of struggles that make it hard for us to function in certain situations. And it's really important that, people understand that
Absolutely.
we raise awareness here on campus. Any more questions? Yeah,
I
Karen?
have a question. It was a really great presentation. Thank you very much, Chloe. And I want to ask about a specific example of a boundary that I know a teacher set with you, so I hope this will be okay for me to ask, but I kind of was just, as an example of what you were talking about. I know I talked with you and your English teacher once about whether you would have more time on some reading assignments. And your teacher then said, well, you can and you're entitled to it, but I don't know if I think that's best, because when you have extra time on reading assignments, you're behind the class discussion, so she said, to me, that's not not necessarily like you said, a request that I feel comfortable
thing
granting.
is that-
And I wondered how you felt about it when that happened, because she asked you, could we make a deal that you do try to do those reading assignments on time? So I kind of wondered how you felt having that, because I thought it was a really concrete example of a time when a teacher said, here's a boundary I'd like you to try to follow.
I think it's just harder for me to process information. I wish, I would have, done that before the due date, because I do my best to, do my reading and understand it the best I could, but sometimes, it just, that struggle to just understand